here, but I have a couple things to talk about before we get too much into what the Bible wants to talk about. You'd heard that we have a Bible study Sunday mornings at 9. We also have a Bible study starting up Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on Hebrews 12 that Terry's going to lead. Hebrews 11. Dang. Eventually, he'll probably get to 12, but he's going to start in 11. And both of those next week will be in the modular, which is just the building right outside. So we have some exciting things going on at our church. If you have been around at all, you know that I'm very much into supporting organizations in our community that do the work Jesus said to do. Whether the organization is founded one way or the other way, it's the end result that we want. And we have plenty of organizations. We have people in this group, this assembly today, that work in those organizations. And one of those is Head Start. Head Start has a building right across the street here, and they have a building right across the street here. And we have been in a partnership with them for the last 4 years to use part of this facility, sometimes in here, sometimes in meeting rooms. And they came to us a few months ago. They said that they have a grant, and they would like to build classrooms. So there's this thing going on in the state, just statewide, with pre-kindergarten childcare, that our school districts are starting to take that on. Because of that, Head Start is looking for new space throughout the state, new places to put classrooms, because a lot of the agreements they had with school districts are not being renewed because school districts are also doing that. So Head Start has approached us with helping to remodel this whole south wing, which is the old wing, that when you walk down in the hallway, you kind of feel the floor has settled really well over time. So they have a grant that they're going to engage us. We've been talking about this for a few months and working out some details of what that looks like so that we all can use the space. They can use the space for pre-kindergarten during the week. When they're not using it, we use the space. And then conversely, we use our church space. And when we're not using it, they can use the space. It's a great partnership. And we've come far enough to where we may begin some demolition of the inside. We're not tearing the whole thing down. It's just this main floor is going to be remodeled, which means all of those walls have to go. There's a lot of structural work that needs to be done. There's some foundation work we're going to do in the old basement to make sure the floors will be level, which will straighten everything up, and the wing will be ready to go for another 30 to 50 years. That may start next week or the week after. So you will see some changes. For instance, we have to move the nursery. And we had some good discussions of where we move the nursery, where it's going to be safe, where there's access to restrooms. We may have to give up a little space, but the nursery is going to be right back there. We have a restroom and a place for moms to nurse. It's not as large, but we do have a restroom right there, as opposed to upstairs and negotiating stairs with kids, or having a nursery out in the modular away from us, which doesn't sit right with me either. So there's some things that will be changing. You'll still be able to use these doors, but the hallway that many people get into the church during the week will be closed off. Children's church will still be upstairs. It'll be a dynamic thing, so I don't want everybody to worry when they come next week and see changes. You can worry, that's okay. But at least you'll know why you're worried. So there are a lot of changes coming. Head Start is a great organization that specifically works with families with financial need and helping children and families, because it's parental involvement. Their board is involved with, parents are involved with their board. Parents are involved in the classroom in teaching how, little things. The bathroom's important. There will be bathrooms in the wing as well. How do you potty train? How do you brush your teeth? How do you just start the process of growing up to get ready for kindergarten? And these are families that don't have those resources necessarily, or they were never taught themselves, so they didn't learn it at that age. I mean, it's a great way, really, to do the work that Jesus has called us to do and partner with these organizations as opposed to starting our own equivalent and competing. So we're excited about that. The best part is the partnership is going to last for a while. It involves them with grant money, paying us to get the remodel done, with them overseeing as well. And then it also involves a long-term relationship with a lease. And that's dependent upon the needs and the ability. The overall, I think, importance for us is that we're able to operate as a church and support the work that Head Start does with our children in town. So that is happening, and that is the reason that the Bible study and both Bible studies are moving out to the modular next week. We want to make them accessible, and right now, that would be our only accessible space for classrooms. So this is an adventure. This is a time that we can all celebrate with a partnership. I know that Head Start's excited, and hopefully that you can join in and be excited as well. So there we go. That's what's happening. Okay, hour and a half to go. There we go. So we are in Colossians still. And we're in chapter 2, verses 16. We just finished Paul's talking about all of what Christ means. And telling us that he explained in chapter 1 who he is really in a way that no other place in the New Testament describes Christ this way. And he gets to a place where we're talking about, he starts off with, don't let anyone judge you. And I'm going to read an excerpt. Hopefully it won't be too long. It's written by a man named Arthur Brooks, and it was published in The Atlantic. And it starts off, if you'll just forgive me for reading, he says, a friend of mine once shared what I considered a bit of unadulterated wisdom. If I wouldn't invite someone into my house, I shouldn't let them into my head. My grandfather had another saying. He said, if I don't respect somebody, why would I care what they say about me? Arthur goes on, but that's easier said than done. Social media has opened up our heads so that just about any trespasser can wander in. If you tweet whatever crosses your mind about a celebrity, it could quite possibly reach the phone in his or her hand as they sit on their couch in their own house. The real problem, though, is not technology. It's human nature. We are wired to care about what others think of us. As the Roman Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius observed almost 2,000 years ago, quote, we all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinion than our own. Whether they are friends, strangers, or enemies. Other people's influence on your opinions about the world pales in comparison to their influence on your opinion of yourself. Evolution neatly explains why, for virtually all of human history, human survival depended on membership in a close-knit clan or tribe. Before the modern structures of civilization, like police and supermarkets, being cast out from your group meant certain death from cold, starvation, or predators. Unfortunately, the instinct to want the approval of others is woefully malapidated to modern life, where once you would have justifiably felt the terror of being expelled into the frozen tundra, today you might suffer acute anxiety that strangers online will cancel you for an ill-considered remark, or passerbys will snap a photo of a poor outfit choice and mock it on Instagram for all to see. In the worst cases, anxiety about the approval of others can blow up into a debilitating fear. Worrying about the opinions of others can lower your basic competence in ordinary tasks and making decisions. One reason we fear others' opinions is because negative assessments can lead to shame, which is the feeling of being deemed worthless, incompetent,
dishonorable, or immoral. Just because our over-concern for other people's opinions of us is natural does not mean that it's inevitable. The right goal for flourishing is not a complete disregard for the opinions of others. Paul says, do not live to please others. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. See, people were starting to try to influence the church in Colossae with their own rules and traditions. Mostly in this case, it was a carryover from before Jesus' time of someone trying who was not born a Jew to become a Jew and following all the traditions of Judaism. And the whole idea that it was simply grace, they could not conceive of that. So it was grace and. And the sad part, it wasn't just a choice. It wasn't just a personal preference. This was, if you don't do it this way, you were less. You really were not a Christian. Their way or the highway. If you didn't follow the rules, you were less. That's a whole lot of pressure. How do you react to that? The truth is, we face this situation today. Every day. There are, 60 people here. Do we have at least 60 different ideas of what we should do in order to be a Christian? Actually, I just changed my mind, so there's 61. You may have changed your mind too. So we probably have at least 300 different ideas of what we should do to be a Christian, because we also change our mind and we're influenced by each other. Paul says, do not let people pass judgment on you. Don't live to please them. God is the judge. He's the one whom we are accountable to. No one else. He's the one we have to answer to. No one else. Now, this does not mean you be prideful. This does not mean you go live in a hole. This means that you still seek others' opinions. It's important to interact. It's important to seek opinions. It's important that you seek wise counsel. But you also need to own your faith. What happens, and I watched this with my children. And I apologize, Nate, because you're the perpetual story, right? I'm going to pick your older brother, though. I watched Nathan's my oldest son. He went to a Christian university, George Fox. And he grew up in the church. He participated in the church. He absolutely knew who Christ is. He understood the idea of grace. But when he got even to a Christian university, he wrestled with, what does this mean for me? And it became then his own. He had to make it his own. It couldn't be, I need to please my dad, and by pleasing my dad, I please God. Or the other way around, I want to please God, so if I please my mom and dad, God would be happy. There is something to honoring your father and mother. But his faith had to become his own. So now dad becomes hopefully wise, not unwise counsel, but it's still his faith. I remember when each of my boys turned 13. So in a couple of years, I'll have another one to be 13. And I don't know if you remember this, Nate, but I would actually sit down with them and talk about how animals, be it a bull or a buck, there was only one lead in the herd. That was it. There was the king in the herd that took care of the rest of the herd. But as the young buck got older, they would challenge the king. And at some point, they left and had their own herd. But it's not an idea of becoming independent. It's learning to become interdependent and seek wise counsel from other people. Because whether I'm wise counsel or not, there will be a time when I am no longer here. And the worst thing that could do is having my children only look to me for counsel. So they look to other people as well. And they may not listen to me. They may listen to one of my friends or one of their friends and do that. But that's part of it being their own. That's different than pleasing someone or making a decision based on whether somebody who will make them happy or they'll see you in a favorable light. We're in the middle of a political season where you are forced to become part of a tribe. In fact, it's really hard to be in the political season or the arena if you're not part of a tribe. We see that playing out in Oregon. The most popular one is the governor's race, right? We have 3 running, not just 2. But there are other races, actually, where there's this, I don't want to be identified this way or this way. I want to be me, and this is what I believe. It's really hard to exist outside of the tribe in politics. That's just the reality. Shouldn't be that way, but it is. But I also know from experience there is a huge draw to paint yourself as someone pleasing to everyone. And you see the extremes of that in advertising, where if you can't paint yourself, then you paint somebody else with a negative brush. So then it goes even further. Don't live to please others. Only God. Only God. Number 2, don't subject yourself to religious sounding rules. We have a lot of that. Colossians 2:16 says, "Therefore do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day." The rebukes targeting Colossians was not about the gospel. They were not being hit, the church in Colossae was not being hit with, the gospel's wrong, you're believing wrong. They were not about the divinity of Jesus. It was not about repentance, faith, or any core gospel issues. It was simply about rituals and traditions. It became, they were trying to impose Old Testament law into New Testament salvation. This is what Paul talked about. If you read pretty much anything that Paul wrote, he's talking about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Not Jesus and. And what they were facing is Jesus and. And here's the thing is, we get comfortable with the and. Yeah, leave that alone. I'm just going to talk off the top of my head for a while. We get comfortable with the and. There are people in this crowd who love checklists. In fact, checklists or getting your list done is what gives you a sense of fulfillment. There are some people in this crowd who hate checklists because they don't want to be accountable. And there's a place for both. And the problem is when the list, either the list and wanting a list or the not wanting a list becomes more important than the task at hand, you have a problem. Both are detrimental. You have to focus on Christ. And if you're so focused on not doing the things that Christ said to do you know him? But if you're so focused on doing the things he said to do that you lose sight of who he is and why he said them and who you are to be, do you really know him? This is a matter of understanding who Christ is. God is not pleased by ritual. He wasn't pleased when people brought sacrifices and their heart were not in the right place. We read that in the Old Testament. He wasn't pleased with rich people who made significant offerings and made a show of giving for their own stature. God's not pleased with that. It makes sense to have a checklist. We like the do list, the to-do list. The problem is this mentality creeps itself into the church. It starts to show up here. Here's some examples. Growing up in the church, I heard this. Like Christians must tithe 10%. Or when the church doors open, you need to be there. I'm not good at that now. Where's Ron? He's not here yet. Men should wear suits and ties to church. I think we've moved past that one in some realm, and in other realms not. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with giving 10%, but it doesn't say that we have to wear suits and ties in the Bible anywhere. Real wine should be used for communion, or real wine should not be used for communion. It becomes a rule. You should not dance. Here's one. Christmas is sacred, or Christmas has been overcome with pagan rituals, so we should observe it or we should not observe it. Nothing in the church doesn't say that at all. In fact, we're going to not celebrate Halloween. We're going to participate because it's an opportunity to integrate with the community. I talked about Head Start and other organizations. Instead of doing our own little pre-K school, now we integrate with other organizations to do the work Christ has called us to do and to shed light to the people who are doing the work and the children who were there. Our faith is about relationship, not rituals. Now, verse 17 talks about these things, the rituals, were shadows of things to come. There's nothing wrong with rituals, but that's not the focus of our faith. There's shadows. See if I can get a good shadow. I've got a shadow here on the floor. Shadows created by light and my presence. The rituals, the shadow points to me. If you follow the shadow, you will find the source that's blocking the light and creating the shadow. But if you focus so much on the shadow, we will never get to meet. If you walk up and just look at the shadow, you miss the relationship. So it sounds strange that Paul would say it's just a shadow. Doesn't mean it's fleeting or vapor. The shadow, it's cast by Christ. There's nothing wrong with the shadow. It's evidence of me being here. In fact, if you want to take it further, the light, God himself, cast onto the sun, creates this shadow, and that's a good thing. He's here. But then don't get so caught up on the shadow, the tasks, the rituals, that you miss him altogether. So I've heard it explained this way too, is I can have photos, and I do, of all my children and grandchildren in our house. And when they're over and you come join me, if all we do is set my kids aside and look at the photos, you never get to know them. Now, there may be some value in looking at past photos, but it's about the people. I'm in love with my wife. Long time. We got married. Can you imagine that if we focused on the wedding so much that we neglected our relationship and one of us decided not to show up because it's all about all the decorations, the church, the money, and everything else? It's like, you know what? I'm not interested anymore. Or, you know what? You forgot to invite me because it's all about the wedding. And I don't know if this is coming across. I miss the relationship with my wife because she doesn't show up. I'm so focused on the task, I'm so focused on the shadow that I missed the person who's causing the shadow. Number 3, don't be distracted by flashy stuff. In verse 18, do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions about their unspiritual mind. In Ephesians 5, it says, imagine a man who went to his, that's a discussion. I just mentioned that one earlier. But went to his wedding. It was spectacular. Cooking was world class. The cake was on tiers. The top band in the world came to play. Rented the Taj Mahal, but there was a problem. His bride didn't show up. See, if I hadn't got ahead of myself, it probably would have made more sense. Don't delight in anyone who delights in false humility. Self-absorbment. Somebody who puts on this pretense of being so humble that they're proud of being humble. And it sounds funny, but it's everywhere today. Everywhere today. That's the other side. You end up being so focused on not doing those things that you become proud of not doing those things. False humility. This leads to spiritual pride. Angels. Angels are all around us. Songs that say that. But the focus is not the angels. The focus is Christ. Angels are here. I'm sure that we've probably seen angels, literally, not knowing it, maybe knowing it, maybe recognizing it. But it's not about the angels. It's about Christ. Paul says visions. Nothing wrong with the vision until the vision becomes the driving focus of your faith and not Christ. Don't be distracted by the flashy, the one that seems so humble, an angel's visitation, truly a visitation, or a vision that God's given you or someone else. Because he's revealed himself in the Bible. Those are all good. Those should be there to encourage you in your relationship with Christ. It's not Christ and. The problem is that we've lost connection with the head. Christ is the head. And growth comes from holding fast to the head of Christ. Number 4, don't practice man-made religions. This is so easy, though. It's so easy to start off with the Bible and then start with a little rule here or there, and that becomes more important. It's happened to me. It's happened to me here in the last few months. I want so bad for something to work that it becomes so important you lose sight of people. You can't lose sight of relationships. You can't lose sight of Christ. Don't practice man-made religions. Colossians 20 through 23. Chapter 2. Since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, why, as though you still belong to the world, do you submit to its rules? You have died with Christ. Why do you submit to its rules? Rules like do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These rules, which have to do with the things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining any sensual indulgence. So what are the spiritual elements of the world? Paul says in Colossians 2:8, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world. Human tradition, deceptive philosophy, and I'm going to reiterate this because I just opened my eyes into lies. It's Satan telling you a lie that really hits and matches your desire, which may be out of order, which is reinforced by the backwards world of right is wrong and wrong is right. We have people in our world who truly want to do the right thing. And because the world lies to them, the right thing is against God's command. But it's not, it's one thing, and I've done wrong things. I've made a decision to do a wrong thing. That's one thing, to at least know you're doing something wrong. We have people in our world that are choosing in their minds to do the right thing because the world says it's right, Satan says it's right, and we're human, and we get mixed up in our own desires. That is a man-made religion. They all come around, or they all look different when they start, but they all come around to, it's about you. Just do what pleases you. Just be empowered by you. It's not about God. Be true to yourself. It doesn't say that in the Bible. It says die to yourself. They all teach to do good deeds. But it's all false and no relationship. We need a relationship, not a religion. So Paul went through this. And in here is just 4 don'ts. Don't live to please others. Don't focus on following a checklist of rules. Don't be distracted by the flashy stuff. Don't rely on works or religion for salvation. There is one do that's hidden in this. Hold fast to the head. Hold fast to Christ. We don't need a rule. We don't need religion. What we need is a relationship with Christ, Christ alone. If someone says to you, hold on to your wife, she's a keeper. It means cultivating your relationship with your spouse, being faithful, and drawing close to one another. To improve your relationship with Christ, use the same methods that you would with your spouse, or that you should with your spouse. Quality time. Spend time with him in the Word. Fasting. Fasting is not just a task, but fasting can actually bring you closer to Christ. Don't fast for show. Fast for the relationship. Communication. Talk with him frequently. Open, honest, personal. Serve him. Give gifts. Serve those he cares about. Don't just serve others for the sake of serving others, if that's what you're worshiping. Serve others for the sake of others because those others belong to Christ and he cares about them, so you care about them. Fix your eyes on Jesus. So the worship team's going to come up here. I'm going to ask you to consider what one thing this week could you do or change in your life that would help you develop a closer relationship with Jesus Christ? Just one thing. I might have a couple, but just pick one. One thing could you do this week this week, starting this afternoon, that you could change to bring you into a closer relationship with Jesus Christ. So as we enter this time of worship and prayer, I would love for you to consider that. And it's okay to declare that to one another. It's okay to declare it to Christ himself, saying, I need to work on this. But it is okay to also bring in some accountability with other people. We will have people at the sides to pray with. We will have people, if you can't get up and you want prayer, raise your hand. We'll come pray with you. If you want to sit where you are and pray and worship and sing, do that. But this is a time to communicate. This is a time to be totally transparent with the Almighty God and to let him know that you want a relationship with him. There are times in my marriage that I know that I need to set aside. It's like, okay, we've been too busy. It's time that I just sit down, maybe get in the car and just drive, because there's less distraction when we're just driving. And there's a chance to just talk and commune with my wife. I know the same thing happens in my life and your lives with just taking time to sit and talk with Jesus, the one who loves you so much that he gave his own life, the one who loves you so much that requires nothing else. There's nothing you can do to cause him to love you less, and nothing you can do to cause him to love you more. Now's the time to talk with him.